The familiar creak of the front door seemed unusually loud as I stumbled into the house, my suitcase bumping along behind me. The week-long business trip had left me drained, and all I wanted was to collapse on the couch and forget about the endless meetings and conference calls. My eyes were drawn to Emma's phone lying on the kitchen counter, its screen lit up with a notification. It wasn't unusual for her to leave her phone out, but the sight of it now felt oddly out of place. I was too exhausted to think clearly, but a pang of curiosity prodded me to pick it up. I saw the text message notification and, despite the turmoil bubbling in my gut, found myself tapping on it. As the screen unlocked, my heart plummeted. The messages were explicit, filled with intimate language and provocative photos. They weren't from me. They were from another man. My hands shook as I scrolled through the conversation, each message a brutal revelation of Emma's betrayal. My mind raced, trying to process the betrayal and the raw anger that was rising within me. The front door creaked again, and I looked up to see Emma entering the house, her face lighting up with a warm smile that quickly faded when she saw the look on my face. "Michael?" Her voice was laced with confusion. "You're back early." I couldn't find the words to respond immediately. Instead, I tossed her phone onto the kitchen island. It landed with a decisive thud, the screen facing up, and the messages visible. "What's this?" I demanded, my voice cold and strained. Emma's eyes widened as she glanced at the phone, a mixture of guilt and panic washing over her features. She took a step back, her hands instinctively rising to cover her mouth. "Michael, save it," I interrupted, my anger barely contained. "I don't want to hear excuses. I want to know why." Emma took a deep breath, her shoulders sagging as she approached me cautiously. "Michael, please. Let's sit down and talk. It's not what you think." I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. "Not what I think? Emma, I'm seeing the proof right here. How long has this been going on?" Emma's voice broke as she tried to hold back tears. "It's been a few months. I didn't know how to tell you. You were always so busy with work, and I felt so alone. I could barely contain the surge of betrayal I felt. So you decided to cheat? That's your solution." "I made a mistake," Emma said, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Mark he was there for me when I needed someone. I'm so sorry, Michael." I shook my head, feeling a cold detachment taking over. "Sorry doesn't undo this. I need to know what to do now." Emma's face was etched with desperation. "Michael, please, just let me explain. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you." Her words were like a dull ache, resonating but failing to heal the gaping wound inside me. "I think you've said enough." With that, I turned and walked out of the room, the weight of Emma's betrayal heavy on my shoulders. The house, once a place of comfort, now felt cold and hollow. I needed space to think, to understand what had just happened and what it meant for the future. The silence in the living room was deafening. Emma and I sat across from each other, separated by the coffee table that felt like an insurmountable barrier. The weight of what I had discovered still hung in the air, and every second that ticked by seemed to drag out the agony of betrayal. Emma's hands fidgeted with the hem of her sweater, and her eyes were red-rimmed from the tears she had been trying to hold back. She took a deep breath, her gaze locked on the floor as if seeking the right words from the carpet. "Michael," she began, her voice trembling, "I know what you saw was terrible. I didn't know how to handle it, and I didn't want to hurt you." I crossed my arms, trying to keep my voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside me. "You didn't just handle it poorly, Emma. You betrayed me. You broke the trust we built." Emma's eyes lifted to meet mine, filled with a mixture of shame and pleading. I know it was wrong. But you need to understand why it happened. It's not an excuse, but it's the truth." I leaned forward, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "I'm listening. Tell me why you thought it was acceptable to cheat on me. What drove you to this?" Emma's shoulders slumped, and she began to speak in a hushed, remorseful tone. It started because I felt so neglected. You were always working late, always on the phone, and when you were home, you were distant. I tried to reach out, but it felt like you were never really there. Is that what you were telling Mark? I asked, the bitterness clear in my voice. That I was never there for you. Emma nodded slowly, her face pale. Yes. I felt like I was living alone, even when you were here. Mark, he listened to me. He made me feel like I mattered. I ran a hand through my hair, struggling to process her words. So, instead of talking to me about how you felt, you chose to be with someone else. How is that supposed to make sense? Emma's voice broke as she tried to explain. I didn't want to burden you with my feelings. I thought if I could just hold on, things would get better. But they didn't. Mark just happened to be there, and I made a terrible mistake. The pain in her voice was palpable, but it did little to ease the ache in my chest. And how long has this been going on, Emma? About 4 months, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. It started with innocent conversations, but it quickly became more. I didn't know how to stop it once it had started. My jaw tightened as I absorbed her confession. 4 months. And you thought this was the answer? Emma's eyes filled with tears again. I thought I could handle it. I didn't realize how deep the wound would become. I'm so sorry, Michael. I've been a fool. I stared at her, the enormity of the betrayal sinking in. Do you realize how much this has hurt me? How it makes everything we've built together feel like a lie? Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes, I do. I'm sorry for everything. I want to make it right, if that's even possible. I took a deep breath, the heaviness of the conversation pressing down on me. I don't know if making it right is even possible. But I need some time to figure out what I want. I need to think about what comes next. Emma reached out a hand, but I pulled away, not ready for any physical comfort. Just, give me some space, Emma. I need to be alone with my thoughts. She nodded, her face a portrait of devastation, as she watched me walk out of the room. The house, once a haven, now felt like a place filled with ghosts of what we used to be. As I sat alone in the quiet, the enormity of the situation began to sink in. I needed to make sense of it all, to find a path forward in the wreckage of what was left of our relationship. The weeks following my confrontation with Emma were a whirlwind of anger and confusion. Each day felt like an endless cycle of questions and regrets. I needed answers, not just about Emma's betrayal but about the man who had come between us. That's when I decided to call Tony, an old friend with connections in the underworld of information gathering. Tony and I had lost touch over the years, but I remembered his knack for getting things done. We met at an old bar on the edge of town, a place that had seen its share of shady deals and confidential conversations. The dim lighting and smoky atmosphere were a stark contrast to the bright, sterile environments I had been used to during my business trip. It felt like stepping back into a world I had left behind. Tony was already seated at a corner table when I arrived. He looked up as I approached, a sly grin spreading across his face. Michael. Long time no see. You're looking well, though I'm guessing you're not here for pleasantries. I slid into the seat opposite him, placing a photograph of Mark on the table. Tony, I need your help. I want everything you can find on this guy. My voice was firm, edged with the frustration and pain I had been feeling. Tony picked up the photo and examined it, his eyes narrowing. Looks like you've got a real mess on your hands. What's the story? Emma, my wife, has been cheating on me with him, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I want to know who he is, what he does, and how I can get some sense of justice. I need to understand him. Tony nodded, his expression thoughtful. I can dig up some dirt for you. But you need to be careful. Revenge has a way of backfiring. I'm not looking for revenge, Tony. I'm looking for answers, I insisted. I want to know who this man is and what kind of person he is. Tony leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. All right. I'll get you the information you need. But remember, sometimes knowing too much can be dangerous. It might lead you down a path you don't want to go. I understand, I said. I just need to know what I'm dealing with. As Tony got to work, I found myself grappling with the emotions that had taken over my life. The pain of betrayal was still fresh, but now it was mingling with a growing need to understand the man who had so callously entered my life. Each day, Tony provided me with bits of information: Mark's job, his habits, his favorite haunts. The more I learned, the more I began to piece together a picture of the man who had taken Emma's attention. One evening, Tony called me with an update. "Michael, I've got some new info. Mark's involved in a few business ventures, and he frequents a particular restaurant. I've also learned he's quite the socialite. It seems he's well connected and doesn't shy away from flaunting it." I felt a surge of determination. "Thanks, Tony. I think I'm ready for a confrontation." Tony's voice was cautious. "Just remember, Michael. Confronting him could have consequences. It might be better to focus on moving forward rather than seeking revenge." "I appreciate the advice," I said. "But I need closure. I need to face this head-on." The more I delved into Mark's life, the more I realized that my quest for answers was becoming a consuming force. I was no longer just trying to understand the betrayal, I was preparing for a confrontation that I hoped would bring me the closure I desperately needed. The plans were set, and the next step was to face Mark and Emma directly, to put everything out in the open and find a way to move forward from this painful chapter of my life. The restaurant was a posh establishment, the kind where soft jazz played in the background and the waitstaff moved with practiced grace. It was a place where people went to see and be seen, and I had chosen it deliberately. I wanted the confrontation to be public, to strip away any sense of privacy or comfort that Emma and Mark might have had. I arrived early, sitting at a table near the back where I had a clear view of the entrance. As I waited, I tried to steady my nerves, but every passing minute seemed to heighten the tension within me. I was determined to confront Emma and Mark with the clarity and composure I felt I needed. The weight of the moment was heavy, but it was also a crucial step toward finding the closure I sought. Finally, I saw them. Emma and Mark walked in together, their laughter and animated conversation starkly contrasting with the storm brewing inside me. Emma looked radiant, her face flushed with the excitement of an evening out. Mark, with his easy confidence and a self-satisfied smile, seemed oblivious to the world of trouble he was about to walk into. I stood up, my heart pounding as I approached their table. The room seemed to fall silent around us, the clinking of cutlery and murmurs of conversation fading into the background. Emma's smile faltered as she recognized me, and Mark's eyes widened with a mixture of confusion and recognition. "Michael?" Emma's voice was a mix of surprise and dread. "Emma," I said, my tone steady but filled with a depth of emotion that was hard to conceal. Mark stood up, a look of discomfort crossing his face. "Hey, man. What's going on?" I looked at Emma, who was now visibly distressed, her hands clutching her purse as if it were a lifeline. "I need to talk to both of you. Right here, right now." Emma's face was a mask of regret. "Michael, please. Let's not do this here. Can we go somewhere private?" "No," I said firmly. "If we're going to have this conversation, it's going to be out in the open." Mark glanced at Emma, then back at me. "Look, I didn't know you were going to find out like this. I'm sorry if I caused you any pain." I shook my head, the pain of betrayal still raw. "This isn't just about what you've done to me, Mark. It's about the impact on my life, my marriage. I need to understand why this happened." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Michael, I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to end like this. I was lonely and I made a terrible mistake." Mark looked uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot. "I didn't know the whole story. I was just there for Emma when she needed someone, just there." I asked, the bitterness clear in my voice. "You're telling me you didn't know you were stepping into a mess? You didn't think about the consequences?" "I didn't think it would come to this," Mark said, his voice defensive. "I didn't want to hurt anyone. I just thought I was helping." The conversation felt like a carousel of accusations and regrets. Emma was crying openly now, her face buried in her hands. I wish I could take it all back. I truly do. I've been a fool. I took a deep breath, the weight of the confrontation beginning to settle. You know, I thought confronting you both would bring me some sense of justice. But it's clear now that what I need isn't revenge or anger. I need closure. Emma looked up, hope mingling with her tears. Michael, please. What can I do to make things right? I shook my head, feeling a sense of finality. I don't know if anything can be done to fix this. I think the best thing for both of us is to move forward. I need to focus on healing and finding my own path. I turned to leave, feeling a strange sense of peace amidst the turmoil. The confrontation had been intense, but it had also been a necessary step in my journey toward closure. As I walked away from the restaurant, I realized that while the pain of betrayal would linger, it was time to let go and move forward with my life. The chapter with Emma and Mark was over, now it was time to begin a new one.